Good evening, I'm David McCullough. Our film tonight is Ballad of a Mountain Man, and it confirms what professional scholars have long known, that some of the best work in preserving the riches of American culture has been done by amateurs, as a labor of love. Most people take for granted the way of life they grow up with. They see nothing special about it. But Bascom Lamar Lunsford of South Turkey Creek, North Carolina, was an exception. He not only recognized the value of the music and dance, the old-time customs and stories of the mountain people he knew, but was determined to collect and save as much of it as possible, out of interest and affection, but also to counteract the popular notion of his people as hillbillies, a stereotype he hated and knew to be grossly unfair. He stood 5 feet 6 inches tall, and he walked, according to one description, all reared back, like a man of substance. He had no university sponsorship, no PhD, no staff, no research grant. Only his interest in people and his phenomenal energy. Critics say that Lunsford neglected songs of political protest and the music of Appalachian blacks, which is true. And his old-fashioned sense of propriety also kept him from recording the body songs of the mountains, and there were many. But until he staged his first big annual folk festival at Asheville the summer of 1928, few mountain people knew how remarkable they were. Our popular appreciation of mountain music and dance has never been the same since.
Well, I picked up my mighty kind of cold of my dog. Picked up my mighty kind of cold of my dog, and away to the mountain for to catch groundhog. Groundhog. Run your sow and half get him out. Run your sow and half get him out. Lord, breathe John of mine in the groundhog stout. Groundhog. Oh, yonder comes Sal with a snicker and a grin. Yonder comes Sal with a snicker and a grin. Groundhog gravy all over her chin. Groundhog. Behind the bush, boy, and went out for wakely move, if you will. He'll roll in a minute if I didn't shoot his brains out. Let's go. Oh, the meat's in the cupboard and the hides in the churn.
I played the guitar to begin with, and Bascom said the songs I was singing and the way I did them would sound better with a 5-string banjo. And I said, well, I don't have a banjo. I've never tried to play a banjo. And he said, well, I'll give you one. He was the root of the whole thing. When you go to Mars Hill College, I mean, you run into Bascom Lunsford. If you go to Asheville, to the festival, you run into Bascom Lunsford, you know? I mean, he changed everything.
Bascom Lamar Lunsford. He was a true American eccentric. Rooted in the hills of Appalachia, a performer, a songwriter, a collector with a passion for mountain music. Lunsford spent his entire life dragging folk music out of the valleys and coves and up onto the stages and into the recording studios of America. By the mid-1950s, mountain music was leaving its mark on country music, bluegrass, rock and roll. But Lunsford's struggle to make this music popular was in direct conflict with his battle to preserve the old traditional mountain ways.
He wanted everybody to stay just the same old way, you know. He didn't like high sophisticated stuff. He wanted it to still be old-fashioned.
We always thought he dressed like some dude. They say he's just a dude. I've heard my friends say. I comes out dude singer.
Come, my little darling, you're sitting by my side. You promised that you'd marry me and be my wedding bride at sundown. The sundown, the sun is nearly down. Going to see my darling before the sun goes down.
Oh, you ought to seen my Cindy
Lives away down south, she's so sweet, the honeybees swarm around her mouth. Get along home. Isn't that the sweetest woman you ever heard about? The honeybees swarming around her mouth? That's the kind of thing that Lunsford's eccentricity is imposed on us all.
I tell you, I've got to tune the Doggett's Gap, you know, named out of the Doggett Mountain up here. I'm going to play over here at Big Sandy, and I'm going to get first prize. And if we'll just get it down just right now, we're going to walk away with first prize.
The young fiddler is Bascom Lamar Lunsford, tuning up with a few friends back in 1927. The song is one of his own.
I've got a girl in the Doggett's Gap, she don't mind setting in a sweetheart's lap.
He grew up doing this, making music, which was as natural as talking in many a mountain home. But he made a career of collecting other people's music, traditional songs and dances that had been handed down from one generation to the next.
I've got a girl in the Doggett's Gap, she don't mind setting in a sweetheart's lap.
Lunsford had a sense that in modern America, this rich yet fragile culture was in danger of dying out. The time was 1965. The place, South Turkey Creek, North Carolina. At age 83, Lunsford was still going out with his second wife, Freda, to do what he'd done for 60-odd years, combing the western North Carolina hills.
How you?
Staying with people till he picked up all the songs, dances, tunes, and tales they knew.
Yeah, pretty good. My wife's been a little frail, but she's getting better rapidly now and doing fine. Well, we'll have to be moving. I'm glad.
At some homes, he might stay the evening. At others, he might stay 2 weeks.
Now you're in for seeing some good country, because I'm going to show you a lot of this territory where our friends live and where they know the old ballads and know about our mountain dances. I think you're going to enjoy this.
The interesting thing about anywhere we'd stop, anywhere in this country, almost anywhere, well, that'd be a song I'd know that I got from a fellow.
Someone said Bascom Lunsford would cross hell on a rotten rail for a good folk song. He'd prick up his ears and be off, gathering the best the mountains had to offer. And he was relentless.
Turn to the right in here and go this old road that I believe that's the road we want to go now, right there.
Don't it sound good to hear? Don't it sound good to hear play?
I hear her play it. I don't know how long it has been.
I haven't heard her play either in long.
You don't play none, John.
I know. She ought to get to playing more than she does.
She sure had.
Yeah.
Well,
Play something slow to start us out.
Twinkle,
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Bascom collected material at informal get-togethers like this. People never knew when he'd show up. Where most outsiders saw folks just sitting around the yard, Bascom saw talent. Talent people in the region took for granted.
That's right.
I can't do it like I used to, kid.
Come a long ways to get you, but it's all right.
Nice fiddling, y'all. There's no kid about that.
Tell me there was a time when you played better than that?
Yeah. Why did you call him Lost John?
Well, they gave John that. I don't know. How come they gave him that name, John?
Well, when old Norman gave me that Momentary County, Ray.
Is that right?
Yeah. We used to cut timber for him, me and my daddy, and And Roy Hall used to play. You remember him?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he was working the mill at the same time I was. And they none of them didn't know I could play at all.
I see.
You know, I just started working. They kept bringing their instruments about every day, 12 up there, and playing something.
Nobody asked you.
No. One day I said to Roy, I said, I believe I want to see you old fiddler me if you don't mind. I'll go ahead, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I cut loose on something. I don't know what it was. No man ought to says, there's your square dance, man. It's lost John, and it's been going ever since.
Is that?
We went to Lost John's. I could have stopped at half a dozen places and heard somebody play the fiddle or pick the banjo.
Wherever Bascom went, he was looking for traditional Appalachian music, still unaffected by radio and television. It seemed like most of the genuine culture was off the beaten path, way off, and it included bear calls, railroad calls, turkey calls. That meant locating Sam Honeycutt.
That gives a little of the turkey call.
I don't know how you get some two horses that. I'm too hoarse for that.
That's like the wild turkey. That's pretty good.
That's one of the most archaic kinds of music making that there could be. You don't have instruments. You don't have words. You have sounds, some imitating natural sounds, others which are just vocal music. I'm amazed that he went out of his way to get that kind of music.
He sang a song. What he sang was when I was a raking, rambling boy. I know he sings that.
Let me sing that?
Yeah, sing that. Huh? Now that's the old time swing to it, mountain.
Wake, a rambling boy. Hey, many a city I ramble through, and yet a city I bode my way, and spend my money at a walnut plane. And when I'm dead,
Sam Honeycutt was a legendary bear hunter. Bascom saw him as a cultural treasure, standing for a way of life that was fast disappearing.
He really had good ears, and he heard it all, and so we have that fantastic piece. It's yodeling, but not connected with Swiss yodeling at all. Yodeling is very old, maybe the oldest kind of human communication, because it carries far.
Sit down over there. Come on here and sit down. Here, you take this high chair.
I know you pronounce your words very well, but I do want to get all those words in there if I can.
Blackjack Davy came a-riding by, sang so sweet and gaily, made the greenwood around him ring to charm the heart of a lady, to charm the heart of a lady. How old are you, my pretty little miss? How old are you, my honey? I don't die for the want of love. I'll be 16 next Sunday. I'll be 16 next Sunday.
Ballads like Blackjack Davy have English, Irish, Scots, and Welsh roots. Handed down by word of mouth, they had changed over the years. Gene and Harold Winters had one version. and it seemed Bascom always had another.
Is that the way you sing it, Mr. Lunsford?
Well,
Sort of.
Not exactly, but that's
Close.
that's it.
Close.
Yeah.
You call it Gypsy Baby?
The last stanza of a song I know of, a stanza I know is, last night I stayed upon this old cold, cold ground beside Blackjack Davy. I'll sleep tonight in a warm feather bed between my husband and baby.
Well,
between
now,
my husband and baby.
Uh-huh.
Well, now, of course, I've heard that both ways.
I've heard it that way, too.
The thing that helps you with the folks is if you can sing them a piece of their own fabric. If you can open up a page so that you're familiar and they think that you belong, and that is what really sets the friendship in motion. They feel, that guy really has it. He belongs here with us, and that's what. So his memory made it possible for him to always keep the conversation going, if you get what I mean, the musical conversation. He could sing a little bit of some other song that might open up another corner of the singer's memory.
I've been amused at myself sometimes, going to church, maybe at a place where I hadn't been to church before, walk in, saying about halfway up the aisle and turn in. They'd say, we'll now all sing number 480. People reach over in the rack, get the songbook, and the man next to me would pass the songbook to me. They all laughed or rely on the book, nearly all of them. I could just sing without the book, and a lot of these old songs, you know. Like I am bound for the promised land. I am bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I am bound for the promised land.
Bascom Lamar Lunsford was a man from a simpler time. Born back in 1882, when there were almost no roads, no telephones, no electricity in these hills. Every mountain gap held a small community, each isolated from the next by the rugged terrain. Bascom was always a little different from his neighbors. His father was a teacher, and he went away to college. After graduating, Bascom traveled the region on horseback, taking a variety of jobs. Anything that allowed him to spend time with people who made music. Bascom said he'd spent the night in more homes from Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, to Iron Mountain, Alabama, than anybody but God. And that's probably a fact, because what he was after could only be found in people's homes, not in library books or on records.
Boy, you know where Bill McElreath lives?
He lives... I do. You go up this hill,
Yeah.
and then you pass a greenhouse.
Yeah.
That's where I live. You go straight up on another hill.
Yeah.
Then you cut a curve and go down the second road, not the first one that goes down toward the other house, but the second one. It's up above that first one down here.
Yeah.
You go up this, and then you keep going. There's a rock house out, and you stop at that rock house, and that's their house.
Now, thank you, boys. That's fine. That's fine.
You will.
That helps us out a whole lot.
Love, oh, okay, let's love. Love, oh, can it be? Love, oh, can it love? Love someone who loves me.
Have I ever been here, honey?
You've never been here with me.
I don't think so.
Never been here with me. Now, that's the little banjo, and it's a good one. He played that one way back when he belonged to the Haywood Ramblers. He and his brother and the Melvin Vaughn Medford. 9 years ago, he was ridden at the mountain dancing.
Bill McElreath, one of Bascom's personal favorites, picking the banjo in a traditional two-fingered style. While other folklorists used notepads and later tape recorders, Bascom relied on his instincts and his extraordinary ability to remember what he'd heard.
He glued my feet on that
Over time, Bascom's love and respect for his culture led directly to his personal campaign against hillbilly stereotypes.
We people of the mountains have been, in a way, slandered considerably, and most systematically.
Hello, Katie. How are you?
Generations of isolation and poverty had made the mountain people easy targets. In fact, Madison County was one of the poorest places in America.
Yes, sir. I just thought maybe you might need a little rest anyway, you know.
Yeah.
These gentlemen here.
Bascom often dressed in a white starched shirt and a black bow tie as a symbol of defiance.
They got to cut it.
I'm not paying them 5 cents.
Yeah.
They cut it down, they'll cut it down.
Yeah. We don't want to bother you because I know that rain might come and stop you in a little bit.
But there were times when the hard reality of mountain life didn't square with the more romantic images Bascom wanted the world to see, and he was fiercely protective.
Bascom was sharing a mountain man, and he wasn't sharing a mountain man because he was thinking of what your camera was seeing.
Delay.
No help, I have to help myself.
Yeah, I'll talk to you a little bit, let these gentlemen see about what we are up against. Yes, sir.
He wanted you to see the agriculture, but he didn't want you to see the stereotype. And you saw. He'd elbow in and elbow back out. Sure. And yet, he took you there. See, that's the heart. And yet his mind said, no, 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 Bascom. Heart says, no, no. See, but I mean, there he was. And he knew when to step in and back out.
For more than 100 years, this region had been viciously slandered. In the 1830s, King Louis Philippe of France described the Appalachian people as the scum of America. In 1912, when Bascom was 20, the New York Times editorialized that as victims of heredity and alcohol, they must change or perish. And in 1935, distinguished historian Arnold Toynbee pronounced the mountain people barbarians.
Happy! He's up! He's sure to try my patience.
Bascom and his people watched as newspapers, comic strips, films, and eventually television continued to reinforce the stereotypes.
I reckons we has the finest food in all the world. Pork chops and eggs for breakfast, pork chops and goobers for lunch, and for supper, more pork chops.
And my ma told my pa first to get up and act like all true mountain men.
The Appalachian was the perfect rube, I think, for people's purposes, for whatever reason. The local color writers who wrote about the mountaineer tended to contrast them unfavorably with the mainstream Americans that they held to be the genteel folks. Bascom bitterly resented this. He said, they've slandered my people, you know. And his whole point, I think, was to try to show the strengths and the, you know, the value of Southern mountain culture.
Very well, old joke like goodbye, Betsy Brown. Very well, old joke like I'm bound to leave this town.
Bascom had wonderful material to draw from. English folklorist Cecil Sharp called Madison County the richest pocket of culture in America. Isolation forced people to rely on each other, not only for survival, but also for entertainment. Nearly everyone could sing, dance, or play an instrument.
When somebody moved, or a new person moved in the house, we'd go serenade them with old dish pans and everything. Yeah, just go around the house, you know.
One would start singing, some of the others would join in, and they'd clap their hands and celebrate it. They just lived like singing. My mother used to sing a lot. And her father would, they'd all go to bed. She used to tell me about it, how they would all go to bed, and he would lie there and sing one song after another till 12 o'clock.
Yeah, they'd have corn shuckings, and after that over, they'd have a big supper, and then square dance. And I was 8 years old first time I went through a square dance. crowd get around. Some of them would put 5 gallons of liquor right in the middle of the pile, so they couldn't get it till it got through. And that's when the square dances started. It felt good, and we'd sing and watch them clog. That was the main thing. Shuffling sand, hollering ladies do-si-do, you ought to know. But it was really good, and we enjoyed it.
Some mountain people took to heart what outsiders said. Bascom wanted them to recognize their own special talents and to turn this recognition into a source of identity and strength.
He wants you to play some.
Anything at all.
Oh, I can. Why, if you know anybody couldn't play the fiddle and have to hold a bowl like that.
You can play just a little.
If it don't hurt you, why?
This might sound rusty to some, but to Bascom, it was worth the effort. He was drawing out another fellow mountaineer.
You got me to dancing.
Quite good.
That's fiddle playing. That's all right. He's got it. You've got it. Well, gentlemen, what time we have, I'll try to explain to you what this is. I thought I'd like to make a memorial to my father and mother. So that's that book, and I felt like it might wind up in somebody's old attic sometime or other, and I'll just give it to the library. And the first few pages are used for people who'd come to my house on South Turkey Creek in Buncombe County, North Carolina, to see me and visit the home and so on. There's some old family records. Here was the first Lunsford that came to America. He's a friend to Charles I, and he turned up in here in 1649. Charles I's head went off in, I believe it was in 1648. So he thought it'd be better for him to turn up in America. So, letters. There's the first state school certificate given to my father. Here's my mother. Here, a picture of my mother. This thing is full of things of historic interest. As we go on down, there's when I was a campaign manager in McDowell County, running the McDowell Sentinel. I was campaign manager for Senator Josiah Bailey and ran the paper that time. Therefore, I get a 3-column double headline in my own paper. Here I was. That's taken away back when I was something. Now there's when I was something right there. Yeah, boy.
He was something, all right, but his friends and neighbors never knew quite what. Among his 20-odd jobs, he sold fruit trees, peddled honey, was a lawyer who hardly ever practiced, did a stint as an FBI man. And in a region where almost everyone was a hardscrabble farmer, Bascom was drifting around collecting songs and dances. People liked him, but they never really had him figured.
Strange, unusual, odd, very poor driver, never looked after his cars well, very absent-minded, a dreamer, but an awful lot of fun to be around. If you needed a lawyer but couldn't afford it, you had somebody who could always head you in the right direction.
The local part-time lawyer married Nellie Triplett, a good-natured woman who saw to the house and bills. And they had 7 children. People were always speculating how on earth he kept them fed and why he so often strayed from home.
Well, I think that's one reason that he was criticized by the neighbors and his mother-in-law. She and my mother's father, neither one were very excited when she married him, you know. He was going to get married when his ship came in. Well, the ship didn't come in. They finally decided to get married, and the ship never did come in. I never did see it.
Lunsford did not do it for money. If he did, he was the worst failure on the face of the earth because he died probably a pauper as far as money's concerned. But Money is not the definition of wealth in the Southern Mountains, and that was what he was trying to advance. Lunsford saw himself as a wealthy man by the true definition of those terms, and money did not define that.
It's not that opportunity never knocked on his door. One of Bascom's biggest chances at financial success came along when he wrote a song that evolved into an American classic, Mountain Dew.
Oh, my first day in court, I wish to play pool and with this story so when the state closed this case, a young man raised his face. He began all the facts to review.
Oh, they call it that good old Mountain Dew, and them who refuse it are few. If you set down your jug, I'll fill up your mug with that good old Mountain Dew.
Oh, they call it that old Mountain Dew.
This happened while he was in the law business, okay? The judge got this guy up for making whiskey. I got this story straight from the horse's mouth. Bascom decided that, he said to the fella, said, "Will you bring us a jug of that liquor in here and let's see what it's like." This was before his trial. So the guy brought it in and Bascom tasted of it, and Bascom decided that he'd try it on the judge. And so he tried it on the judge, and the judge said, "Man could make that good of whiskey." So he turned the man loose. And so that was where Mountain Dew was born.
Yes, he called it that old Mountain Dew, and those that refuse it are few. So I closed up his mug when I filled up his jug with good old Mountain Dew.
The upshot of this story was that after a week out collecting songs far from the North Carolina hills, Bascom traded all rights to Mountain Dew for money to buy a train ticket home.
I wish I was a mole in the ground.
Eventually, he did play a role in the burgeoning recording industry, not as a composer or performer, but as a preservationist. He was invited to Columbia University in New York, and in 2 weeks recorded more than 350 songs from memory. Later, he cut 3 LPs and finally recorded his entire repertoire for the archives of the Library of Congress. It was one of the most extensive oral histories ever recorded by a single individual. But what he became best known for was this: dancing. Once again, he took what others saw as just another social activity and identified it as an indigenous art form.
Turn the thing upon a lady. Now you swing your partner. On to the next one. Have a left 4 1/2 way round. That's it. Now, we'll go to the home of Bill McAree in Buncombe County. He can do that just like a young man. Johnson boys gonna cook, Johnson boys gonna stay, Johnson boys gonna cook. Didn't have the money to stay that way.
This was buck dancing, a lively, highly skillful dance. Steps were borrowed from the Scots-Irish jig, the Blacks' flatfoot dance, and Cherokee tribal dances. It was about the most original form of expression people had at the time. One could do whatever came naturally.
Now that type of dancing, of course, not done as possibly skillfully as he's done that, but the dancing, knocking out the tune to the feet, going all the way through the square dance, makes our mountain traditional dancing very attractive.
Other folklorists might have frowned on it, but Bascom was enough of an entrepreneur, enough of an American to say, hey, this looks good, and the folks will like it. And the folks did like it.
It was a major breakthrough for Bascom. He took advantage of all this enthusiasm and began to run regular public competitions. It had never been done this way before. People came out of the woodwork. musicians and dancers alike, to perform and to compete. Bascom's contests sprung up throughout North Carolina. More than a few of them were held here, at his house, where he built a special dance floor.
Wasn't too many people invited out there to dance. Move back the furniture and pull up the carpet and just have a big time.
With dances like this one, Bascom rekindled the spirit and skill of mountain dancing. But there were some preachers, teachers, and parents who considered all this sinful, fearing the contests would foster drinking, fighting. But the dances never stopped. Fellas continued to square off and compete at buck dancing, as much for the benefit of the ladies as anything else. Bascom paid his critics no mind, hovering among the dancers, watching like a hawk for new talent, taking note of who pleased the crowd.
We were just more or less watching each other. When he'd change steps, I would, or he would go into a step and I'd go into something completely different. It sounded like this. I ain't barely do a few steps there. And I'm gonna join with it and get a little sound going with it here.
It was here, 12 miles from his home, that in 1928, Bascom Lunsford sparked a cultural revolution. The city of Asheville represented everything Bascom disliked, a resort town dedicated to the commercial. It prided itself on European culture, opera, the latest fashions.
They did not want to see themselves as rural, as mountain. They wanted to see themselves as cosmopolitan. They were in search of everything this nation was in search of, in modernization, industrialization, technology, all the other things which Lunsford was most uncomfortable with.
The event of that summer was the Rhododendron Festival, a vanity fair of attractions designed to lure outsiders and convince them to buy real estate. As fate would have it, this shameless display of all that Bascom hated, commercialization, stereotyping, became the theater for his greatest triumph.
The Rhododendron Festival was a strange thing. You talk about a potpourri, trying to get everything in. Here is a Negro baby parade. See? Here are beauty pageants. Here are people coming from Canada, Cuba, to participate in the mountains of North Carolina, Asheville Parade, sure. Here are military, do-do. All this was part. See, anything that would ring the bell, anything would ring the bell. And lots of people got excited about it.
To whip up even more attention, festival organizers turned to a promoter who lived up in the hills, collecting folk culture. Lunsford was asked to put on a little sideshow of locals in hopes that tourists might find them worth a gawk or two. Bascom jumped at the opportunity.
This is a gray eagle. It was played at the very first of Mr. Lunsford's festivals, and I played it for him to open the show several times since then.
Lunsford's stage show hit Asheville like a bolt of lightning. 5,000 people showed up, tourists mixed with mountaineers. Everybody cut loose. The sideshow turned out to be the main event.
I was on Pack Square, and there were a lot of people and plenty of chairs there. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" "We're having a folk festival," Lunsford said. "Would you come down and sing?" I said, "What kind of songs do you want?" They said, "We just like the songs that the people sing or have sung."
We met, our little farmer boy. We met, said she. It's only came from only the swing.
They loved it, and they'd smile good. Oh, Lord, they'd applaud you and holler and try to do it themselves.
I think maybe the word to describe that, Tommy, that we're seeking, wouldn't it be organized confusion?
Really? Really?
As you say, I was on his show more times than I have fingers and toes. And I never knew him missing a lick.
As a result of his success, the Mountain Dance and Folk Festival, as it would later be called, became an annual event. As an ever wider group of entertainers got involved, bringing with them new ideas and styles of performing, Bascom tightened his grip on the festival. He became an impresario and increasingly bossy.
Well, it seems that one year I went down the festival, and all of a sudden he said, "Roger?" He said, "Roger?" Yeah, I said, "Yes." And he takes me by the pants and by the neck, and he walks me out of the auditorium on the side. He sort of just takes me right out, and I never knew why. I got from some other person that I was wearing jeans and a plaid shirt at the festival. And he didn't care for that at all.
Some of the fellows came on the show with cowboy hats. Bascom stacked them up over on the corner of the stage.
What was it he didn't like about those hats?
He didn't want any cowboys on that show. He wanted the true mountaineer, shall we say? Or is that an offensive word? No, I guess not, because I'm one.
Huh. Lunsford always had his own private definition of true mountain music. He would be criticized for single-mindedness. He had no interest in songs that grew out of political issues, labor struggles, or civil rights. He was interested in one strand of music, which he promoted with a passion.
He got all the good musicians in this section of the country on the stage there in no time at all. And he didn't pay them very much. He did pay them something like $3, $5. But that was something to get them out there. And in no time at all, the auditorium was filled up with people.
Bascom's festival was the beginning of widespread acceptance of the music he championed for so long. Festivals sprouted up all over the country. And as Bascom had long recognized, it was the dancing that drew the biggest crowds. By the time this film was shot in 1965, Mountain dancing had entered a new era, precision clogging, which had grown out of Bascom's competitions. It was square dancing mixed with clogging and buck dancing, and it was done in teams. Purists argued this was a bastardization of the old original forms. They objected to taps on shoes, amplified music, costumes. Over the years, there had been compromises. And in the end, the irony was that some accused Bascom of tarnishing the very culture he fought to preserve. But there was no doubt he had pushed Appalachian music and dance into the cultural mainstream. Bascom woke the sleeping giant of Appalachian mountain culture. He helped start folk festivals all over and became known as a leading American folklorist. He toured the world performing and lecturing, entertained the President and Mrs. Roosevelt, and the Queen of England. And never once in over 60 years did he stop mining his southern Appalachian mountains for good tunes and good characters.
Give us another one now. Give us another one. Give us another one. They like it. Yes. Yes. Give us another one.
I'm going to play the Scolding Wife.
All right. He's going to play the Scolding Wife. Scolding Wife. All right.
If he thought you could had anything to offer at all, I mean, if you could carry a tune and get some sort of exposure anyway.
That's why I said that he touched a lot of people's hearts, because he went out and got them, as Red said. He hunted them up. Some of them went to him, and he's left his mark on this country because of what he's done. with his leadership to bring all his people together. And once a year, people come from everywhere to meet him, just to get to see him now, not to meet him and shake hands with him because, you know, there's too many people.
Everybody figured they'd see Bascom Lunsford go right on forever. And it appeared from the energy he put out that he thought so too.
He bought a little old Volvo car, okay? The front end was out of it, and I didn't want him to drive it. I told him I would come and get him, bring him down here if he'd leave the thing at home, and he drove it anyway. And he had such trouble with that car, I believe, that when he got down here to Laurel River, he had a stroke. He went over to Haney's. They couldn't understand nothing he was saying. But I'd been around him so much, you know, that I could understand what he was saying. Well, he told me to take him to Dr. Kerr at Leicester. I knew that he needed more attention than the Dr. Kerr could give him or would give him. And I told him to take him to the Mission Hospital, which they did. And I remember I waited 2 or 3 days before I went to see him because I knew what I'd done to him and I knew what he'd do to me whenever he got where he could. So I waited 2 or 3 days and then I went to see Bascom. And by that time he was sitting up in the bed talking. And so when I walked in, the first thing he said was, "You didn't do what I told you to do. I told you to take me to Dr. Kerr. You never done it. You brought me up here in this hospital where I can't do nothing."
The Blue Ridge Mountains blues, and I stand right up and say, my grip is packed for travel, and I'm scratching gravel to that Blue Ridge far away. I know the day that I'll return, there'll be a shindig in the barn. The folks from miles around will come. There'll be some fiddlers in the storm. I got the Blue Ridge Mountain blues, and I stand right up and say, my grip is packed for travel, and I'm scratching gravel for that Blue Ridge far away.
We love our mountains, don't we, darling?
We love our mountains.
But I never will forget me going back. I went over to Asheville to see him. I lived in Hendersonville then, and went over there to see him and went back there. And when he seen me, I said, "Hello there." He said, "Come here, let's ladies do-si-do." He grabbed me, swung me around. He was one good man.